It's getting hot in here. 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 Okay, the gangs are here, and everything feels alright.
What's your favorite iRod model?
Of course, it's my rod. My rod, the iRod. This one actually right here is my favorite. It is the 754, and it's the Air. And you'll know it's got my signature on it. But it's a 7'5" heavy action rod. But what's nice about this rod, not only is it one of the Air series, which is lighter, a little bit more sensitive, but it handles throwing a frog in heavy vegetation like no other rod, and it will not wear you down. The backbone on it is just incredible. But it's a universal rod, not just to throw a frog with. I throw buzz baits. I slow roll spinnerbait with it. I'll even throw some jigs with it. So I mean, it's a swim jig for one thing, but it's such a universal rod, and it's an incredible rod. And I think it's probably one of the better selling rods too. That's the iRod Air 754.
All right, Fred, we got another question from Bassin VA123, and the question is, say you fish a tournament with only one bait, what would that bait be?
Woo! That's so hard because half the time I have 20, 30 rods on my deck during practice. So if I had to choose just one bait, it'd have to be a swim bait. And I'll tell you why. Because I fish to win. If I get bit on a swim bait, I'm getting the right bites. And, I would typically say if I'm just going fishing, I want to catch fish, and it wouldn't be a tournament situation, but and we're talking about one individual tournament, right? We're not just talking about trying to make a championship at the end, right? I'd say a swim bait would be my number one bait of choice to win the tournament. However, if I'm fishing and I have one bait to fish a whole series, it would be a jig. So you catch more fish with jigs, jig win a lot of tournaments, but if you catch them on a swim bait, you'll be in that top 5 almost every time.
Perfect. So for fun fishing, you're going to go with a jig, or numbers. To catch numbers, you're going to go with a jig. And,
and for a seasonal situation, like for an entire season, if I had one bait to fish for an entire season, it'd be a jig, because you can swim it, you can work it on the bottom, you can flip it. I mean, there's so many things you can do with a jig. But a swim bait, when you get on that swim bait bite, you're fishing to win that tournament.
I see. So look, around the country, it's pretty much cold. I know it was cold down there in Oklahoma, and it's cold up here in Virginia. Do you ever think it really gets too cold to catch bass?
I honestly thought it did get too cold to catch a bass. I really did, because I'm from California. I mean, I never fished waters at less than 45-degree, temperature. Came to Oklahoma and fished the first January out here. We had that huge freeze, but I mean, it was 37-degree water, and I caught a bass. And until I had done that, I wouldn't believe you could do it. So apparently, it's never too cold to catch a bass. It might be too cold for you to go fishing to catch a bass.
All right, look, we got a couple other questions that have come in here for you. How about this one? What's the proper way to fish a swim bait? So I guess, if you had to pick one way to fish a swim bait, a versatile way, what would that be?
That's a really hard question, because it's really a simple way to fish when the fish tell you how they want to eat it. But there's a lot of times where you want to drag it on the bottom. You want to snap it up off the bottom sometimes. And sometimes you just want to find the water column the fish are suspended in. Sometimes you want to drag it over the tops of the trees. So it's a real complex question. It's hard for me to give a real good answer. But I can tell you most of my success with a swim bait is on tapering long points or flats, and just making real long casts. Very critical to make a super long cast. Get away from the interference of you and your boat and your trolling motor. Get into their environment without them ever knowing. And, just hold your rod up at about 11 o'clock and just get a nice slow retrieve. Use like a 6.5 to 1 ratio reel or slower, and keep a little bit of slack in your line. And you just got to keep that retrieve going. And when you see that line,
All right, we got some questions rolling in here now, buddy.
Uh-oh.
What's your favorite swim bait make and color?
Well, it's funny, but with Optimum Baits, this is my favorite color. It's a trout pattern, but we named it after my son Jackson, and it's called Jackson trout. There's no such thing as a Jackson trout. It's an imaginary trout, but it's basically a green pumpkinish back with a pearly pink belly. And I just find that color seems to work coast to coast, and it's one of those fallback colors for me. I've got a lot of confidence. It really excels in cloudy conditions, but you can still catch them in the sunshine. It's just an awesome universal color.
All right, here goes another question for you, Fred. Do you use braid or fluorocarbon most of the time for swim bait fishing?
It depends if I'm fishing grass.
I said I need them like now.
That's the thing. I mean, in all these techniques that we do as pros and or just fishing in general, it just really depends on the situation you're at. And I'd say 75% of the time I'm using P-line 100% fluorocarbon, and for a few reasons. One is it sinks because there's no pores in it. It's invisible because it is fluorocarbon, and there's very little stretch in it. So you have really good contact to your bait, and you can get a really good hook set, especially on a far cast. So I'd say, my number one would be a 20-pound P-line 100% fluorocarbon.
Let's see what we got going on here now. It says, speaking of iRods, there are two series, Genesis and Air. What's the difference? Do I need to use Air rods to have a quality rod?
No, not at all. As a matter of fact, the majority of the rods I use are the Genesis 2, and they're very affordable. They're like $150, $150. And, you're looking at $250 for the Premier rod. The Genesis 2, they're lighter. They're a bit more sensitive. But in general, I mean, I probably use the Gen 2s more than anything. They're both very durable rods, and you really can't go wrong with whichever one you choose. If you're with my series on my 754 or my Magic Stick, I like my Magic Stick for more of a contact rod, like a jig rod or a Carolina rig rod or a big plastic worm rod, where I like my 754 Air more for a power fishing rod, and it's more of a buzzbait, a frog, a swim jig style rod. Even though it's the same weight and same action, they fish a little bit differently, and that's what I choose the Air for more of my power fishing.
All right, here goes another one. Oh man, they're rolling in here, buddy. My home water is Pool 8 of the Mississippi River, and it's loaded with grass. How do you break apart all that cover and locate the most productive water?
I've never been there. I really don't know. No, I'm just playing. My first win actually was an Everstart out of Pool 8 back in 2005, I think it was, and that's really what started my career. So, and then we obviously went there for the elites this year, and I finished 4th. So I have a little bit of history on Pool 8, and obviously that's where I fished as well. The way I pick it apart, and the best way I'd say to pick it apart is fish your strengths. If you're going in, like for me, I went down there, I saw the grass instantly, I knew I was going to pick up a frog. I'm from California Delta, I've given a lot of money to Bobby Barrick over the years. So I was saying is I grew up fishing the California Delta, which is a vegetation river system, very similar to the Mississippi River, very similar to Pool 8, with the fact that we have tidal. But, I found similarities right away. The way I pick apart the grass at the Mississippi River is I want to find an area where when the wind changes, it'll push the fish to some kind of a structure, whether it's a rock levee, a rock jetty, it could be even just a land bank that's got maybe even an undercut. But you want something where, because it's a river system, there's just constant change in the environment. Those fish are going to be moving back and forth. It's a river system, and the environment's constantly changing. I basically look for similarities that I've caught fish in other bodies of water that look like it. Grass obviously is going to flourish where there's not as much current or on the edges of the river channel. So the first few feet going into that from the river channel is usually going to be a good area for the fish to go in and out and feed. When they go in and feed, they're pretty easy and vulnerable. and then they go back out in the river. So, just try to work the river channel and look for the pockets closest to the river.
All right, here goes a good one for you, Fred. Do you do any on-the-water training where you take someone out and help them learn techniques? Is that something that you're doing or you would be interested in doing in the future?
I would definitely be interested in doing it in the future. I've kind of pondered the idea with Bass University. They've actually set up a deal on their site. I think I might be charging a little too much though for a day deal, but yeah, I'm definitely open for it. I'm so limited on time. I've got several new sponsors this year, and I've got a lot of obligations. So it would be something I'd have to do in the fall time, which is one of my favorite times to fish. So I'm open for it, absolutely.
Gotcha. Here's a question from Tommy Boy 1. We may have to think about this one a little bit. With all the time you spend at trade shows, what salesperson has done the best at getting placement of your products into key fishing retailers?
Oh, absolutely, Tim Golden. There's no doubt about it. Yep, Don.
Well, that's a nice
a no-brainer right there.
Nice little deal there.
Yeah, he did have me play Spider-Man at his son when he turned 2's birthday party, which was quite embarrassing because I was wearing a tight little spandex outfit. And that wasn't too cool.
Awesome. But, all right, here's another question. This is you're getting a lot of questions in here tonight, buddy. I fished the Potomac River, which is tidal. How do you use the tide?
The tide's awesome because it basically tells you, like, if you take a spot, just take any spot in there, whether you're going to, I can't even think of the names of the Potomacs. I've been there for a few years, but just say you take one little pocket, fish it all day long. Don't leave that spot. Find out what happens at the lowest tide. Find out what happens at the highest tide. Once you find the feeding, when those fish are feeding, you can start running that tide throughout the river. And generally, everything happens about an hour later every day. So that's on the California Delta. It's very similar there. One thing I do know about the tide on the Potomac River, if you've got a north wind, it will hold that tide up and it won't drop down. 90% of the time, I look for the outgoing tide, the bottom of the outgoing tide, and look for those weed lines. That's where those fish are going to be plentiful, and that's where we're going to be feeding.
Gotcha. All right, here's a good one. I'm curious to see how you answer this question. If you weren't a pro angler, what would you be?
Dead? No, I don't know. That's a good question. I at one point I chose. I thought I wanted to be a pro snowboarder back in the day. I spent a lot of time snowboarding. Unfortunately, one of my biggest injuries in my life was a snowboarding accident, and I woke up in the hospital several hours later. So pretty much ended my snowboarding career. And fishing, I thought, was a safe bet. And shortly after that, I sunk my boat, my very first bass boat. So you never know. But fishing's been something I've always wanted to do, and it's definitely been a lifelong passion.
What websites and magazines would you recommend to me to read to become a better angler?
What magazines?
What magazines and websites would you recommend for me to read?
Well, for sure, Bass Quest magazine, Bass Master magazine. There's Bass Angler's Guide. There's several good ones. I mean, even FLW makes a great magazine, but Bass Quest magazine is the hot one right now. You ought to check it out if you haven't checked it out.
What about websites? Don't be shy.
Well, I'm not gonna be shy. You guys are on the website. I like, everyone. You got BassEast.com. You've got BassZone.com. You've got BassFan.com. And hopefully my website will be pretty interesting to check out. And that's
everybody needs to go check out Wired to Fish. They got awesome content there.
Is a good one. Yeah.
And Advanced Angler too. They got some good stuff there. We're all buddies.
Yeah. Well, I have them all on my screen on my iPad. You can just put a little icon. So I just click through each one every day. And that's pretty much how I go through, So there's a lot of good ones out there. There really is. I just can't think of all of them. I'd have to go click off my screen and just tell you.
I think you got the main ones.
Yeah.
All right, here's another question from Dylan Fisher. As a co-angler in both the BFLs and Everstart series, how does someone in my position get a sponsor?
As a
Attention.
co-angler,
Yeah, for looking for sponsor attention.
you know, it's finding a sponsor. You know, what I would say for you, I'm not sure what age you are, but the easiest thing to do, I would say, is, you know, hang out at a tackle shop, find, you know, when the reps come in and see if at any time you can help them out. You know, I actually have a pretty long history in the industry, being that I started off at a tackle shop, and then I went on to work as a sales rep, and then went to a distributor rep, and then went back to a sales rep, and then went to a manufacturer assistant sales position before I actually became a pro fishing. So I built a pretty solid foundation in the business. But what I would say for you know, a co-angler is get an opportunity to meet your reps at these trade shows. Ask if there's any way you can help out. You know, ultimately, sponsorship creates sales. I don't really like to look at them as sponsorships. I like to look at them as partnerships. I feel like, you know, I'm entering a partnership with every sponsor that I do. We feed off each other to make a successful relationship and prosperous for both of us. So if you can go out there and help them, and they see that, and then, you know, you also want to be of value to them. And the way you become a value, obviously, perform on the water, perform off the water, and you know, hold yourself in a professional manner at all times. And you know, that it all goes a long way. Ultimately, winning. You know, they come to you when you start winning, and when you step foot on the front of the boat, it's going to make it a lot easier.
Absolutely. And just, you know, just so you'll know, Dylan is 18, so he's, you know, just getting started. And
perfect.
I agree with you about the going and helping at the trade shows. You know, just you know, being an asset to them, and they'll see that, right?
Absolutely. If you walk into a tackle shop, you know, and you see somebody that you can tell is kind of struggling, because, you know, for most people that get into fishing and they go into a tackle shop, it is so overwhelming. Go to your local Bass Pro Shops and just start helping people. Look for what they're looking. You know what I mean? You obviously know enough if you're a fishing co-angler to be able to help somebody catch some fish. And sometimes these people that walk into these tackle shops really are intrigued by fishing, but know absolutely nothing. And if you can go and help them, guess who's watching you? The people at the store are watching you. They're going to start putting a good word in for you, and it can escalate from there.
Exactly. All right, here's a good one from Bass and BA again. How'd you get the nickname Boom Boom?
You know what? It's a funny story, but I'm very fortunate that I got the nickname Boom Boom. It came from back in 2007, 8. I'd actually won back-to-back years, and when I was making the top 12, I was a real threat to win, which hopefully I'll be that way this year. But you know, it's the Mark Jeffries from the Bass Zone and Harold Allen just started calling me it, and I've been called a heck of a lot worse. So I went along with the Boom Boom and was able to trademark it, and that's where we are. It's a good brand, I guess.
All right, how about this one? This is going to be a tough one for you to answer, I think. Bassmaster Classic or FLW Cup, which one would mean more?
More money or more prestigiousness?
Yeah, you know, just
you know, honestly, I've as a kid growing up, the only thing that there was when I grew, you know, at the time was Bassmasters, and that's where the Classic was what got me into the sport to begin with. So I want to win the Classic. I do want to win the Forrest Wood Cup as well. So you know, whichever one happens first, I'll be extremely happy. But I'm gonna win both.
All right, here's another good one. This is rocking tonight, buddy. This is gonna be another hard one for you to answer too, but I want you to answer it honestly. If you had to give up one technique forever, could never use it again, and you had to choose between these two, frog or a swim bait, which one would it be?
Why don't you just cut my arms off while you're at it? No, honestly, gosh. You know, everyone's getting so good with a frog, but there's still so many secrets about a swim bait. I don't know. Honestly, I think there's nothing like watching a frog bite, so I'm going to switch my. I don't know. You guys got me. I quit. You can't do that to me. That's not right. I like them both a lot, equally. So we'll just say get rid of the swim bait. Nah, get rid of the frog. Nah, I don't know.
All right, here goes one that I'm kind of interested in your answer on. I've used side imaging for several years now. What's your take on it?
It's incredible. I mean, it really is. It's there's so many ways to view it and to learn from it. And every time I use it, I feel like I learn a little bit more. But it actually, if you're on a ledge lake like a Kentucky lake, you don't really want to look at what may be on the bottom as much as looking at the schools of fish that are stacked on the edges. And you can find those schools and literally just sit there and fire them up with a jig or a crankbait until you get them to bite every single cast for, you know. And that's honestly just from finding them with the structure scan. And I don't necessarily pay attention to the bottom all the time. What I'm talking about is looking for those schools that might just be piled up, and they'll just look like a bunch of white dots. And when you find that, you know you found something special. I probably just gave away some really good secrets there.
Gotcha. What's your thoughts on the 360 imaging that Humminbird has out now? I know you're not a Humminbird guy, but
no, I mean it seems like pretty interesting stuff. I've always had Lowrance, and they've got some pretty cool stuff coming out too this year. I'm not obligated to talk about, but it's coming.
Right, exactly. I just want to kind of let all you guys know on the chat tonight that Bass Quest magazine and this winter issue is featuring an article with Fred that was written by Ryan Wood, who's a junior national championship. It's a pretty good read. Bass Quest magazine, you can get a subscription for like $20. Well worth the money. Don't you agree, Fred?
Absolutely. Yes, I think that is one of the neatest magazines out there right now. So, I think I'm looking forward to doing some more work with Bass Quest.
All right, we got here's a good one for you. What little enhancements do you do to your frog? Is there anything you can or will give away?
Yeah, I mean, it just depends. The thing about it is no frog is created equally. So I'm not going to sit here and say this frog's better than this frog and this frog's better than this frog. But I will tell you that I always, if the frog allows it, will stick a Gamakatsu hook in it. The EWG style hook just seems to not only get a better hookup, but when they come up through that grass and stuff, they don't shake it as easily, and you land more fish. So I'm always making sure I change out the hooks to an EWG. Some frogs you might have to go down to the 3/0. Most frogs fit a 4/0. So that's probably the number one trick. There are times where your frog might start sinking a little bit, and what I'll do then is always have a little bottle of Gorilla Glue, and I'll just Gorilla Glue the bottom hole. And when you do that, it won't collapse. So it makes for a good practice frog, so that way you can shake them off. But you got to remember to make a couple slits on the top, and I'll just follow the lines of the hook from the point to about maybe 1/8 of an inch in front of it. And what that does, those slits will allow it to collapse, and it'll always be buoyant. So those are the two things. Sometimes I add rattles, sometimes I cut the legs, but for the most part, whoever designed the frogs probably did a pretty good job designing them, and they did it for a reason. So, try just those two simple things, and you can always go from there.
All right, here's one I wanted to get to a little bit later, but being somebody brought a question up, we're going to talk about it now. When choosing a reel, how important is casting distance? And what reels do you recommend? Let's talk about the new reel that we were going to talk about a little bit later, but let's go ahead and tell everybody about it now.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this one because it's been in the development for a long time. I actually went to Ardent because in the wintertime I was fishing with a guy, and he had Ardent reels when they first came out. And I couldn't believe how well they function in the really cold weather. But as far as making a long cast, I've never seen a reel cast further than the Ardent. And I remember I was at Kissimmee, and Alton Jones was fishing near me, and he had the Ardent reel. That was even before I even knew what he was throwing. And he was casting this little horny toad twice as far as what the reels I was using. And so I knew he had something special there. So I went to Ardent, purchased my first couple, and then I was very fortunate to land a sponsorship with them, a product deal, and it's been a great ride. But they now just came out with a 150 $50 model that only weighs 5.9 ounces. And I got to use them here for the last 3 or 4 months, and the castability is absolutely incredible. I've actually got it right here for you. Yeah, it's the new Apex. This little guy right here. It's only 5.9 ounces, and they got a 7.3 to 1. I like a high ratio. They also got a your 6.5 to 1, and it's just those are the 2 reels I use the most. I rarely go to a 5. If I'm going to crank, I'm going to stay in the 6 range, and because I like to burn my crankbaits a lot. But yeah, this guy right here is just the ultimate all-around lightweight reel, and I'm stoked to have them all ready for next season, for this season. So that's the Ardent Apex, $150 for their top.
When will they be coming out? When will people be able to get those?
I would think. Well, I know EliteBass.com's got them right now, so I think they're available.
Got them now already. That's cool.
Yeah. They're in stores right now. So hot ticket.
All right. What's your favorite knot for fluorocarbon?
I'm kind of embarrassed to say this because I don't know the names of very many knots. I've always been a Palomar guy, and then Mike McClellan showed me a knot, and it's just an easy one. You put the line in, you loop it, and you wrap it around. You wrap around the bait, and you go back through, and back through one more time. It's fast, and I don't know what it's called, but it's awesome. And
maybe we can.
What's nice about this knot is it doesn't put any stress on your fluorocarbon. See, what happens with fluorocarbon is it can cut itself easier than any other line. So if you're doing a Palomar and you don't pull the line equal at the same time, and you leave just a little bit, you'll see a little stress spot in front of your knot. If you see that ever, cut it and retie it if you're doing Palomars, because that will break. That weakens it. But if you tie it, make sure you get it plenty wet. And even with this knot, I always wet it. Fluorocarbon is a little bit heat sensitive, so when you pull on it, you don't want to do that either. So just make sure you tie your knots evenly. You'll be all right.
Right, and always wet them, right?
Absolutely, always wet them.
All right. How about this one? I think somebody might be letting a little cat out of the bag, but what are your thoughts on the Spotlight scan from Lowrance? Or can you even talk about that yet?
That's the deal. That's all I'm gonna say. You better believe I'm gonna have that on my boat this year.
We've got a couple guys that have offered some different knots, a San Diego Jam knot, and
I think that's what it's called, San Diego Jam. That's it, right there.
Maybe what we'll do is get you to tie one of those knots and share it with us on a video here on Bass East in the next few weeks.
Yeah, I can. That's easy to do. I just don't have my line. I have to go down to my garage and.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's fine. All right. How about this one? I'm getting ready for fantasy bass fishing. I'm taking you for the classic. Name 3 more guys.
Name 3 more guys. Well, you got to pick the heavy hitters on this one. Aaron always seems to find a huge school of fish at Guntersville, so you got to pick Aaron Martins. There's a lot of Alabama fishermen fishing this tournament. There's and I may be partial to Gerald Swindle just because I like the guy, but I think he's due. I think he's due for a big win, and that's one of his home lakes. So I think you could look out for him. And did we mention a guy named Boom Boom? Oh yeah, I was already picked on that. No.
Yeah, he was his first pick.
No, Kevin Van Dam. I mean, as hard as it is, you just know he's going to catch him. You know it. He always does. And especially on a lake like this, situation like this, it's going to be a reaction bait tournament of some sort. He's one of the best at it. So that's it.
How about a dark horse? I mean, who could sneak up and just steal it?
Dude, that college kid, I say that, but he's a stud there.
Yeah.
And, I have to say that, that's one of his home lakes. And I've known Matt for quite some time. I haven't met Jordan, it's the Lee brothers. And I know that I've seen some photos of fish they caught in years past this time of the year. So they know that lake very, very well. I would say they might be the dark horse on this one. Or he will, I should say, Jordan Lee.
Yeah, I think it's probably a pretty safe bet.
Yeah.
All right, here's a question from Fishing with Leland. I'm going to kind of paraphrase it a little bit. He's fishing in Knoxville, Tennessee area. Get back started fishing in February. What baits would you recommend for that time in a Tennessee River lake?
For February fishing?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be similar to the baits I'm going to choose for the Classic. You know, a guy like this right here, this is I'm a Flit. This is a suspending jerkbait. February rolls around, this is the bait to go to. This is going to be probably one of the #1 style baits used at the Bassmaster Classic this year, which is Tennessee River System Lake. Basically, it's just it's a deal. You rip it, you let it suspend, and be patient with it. Those fish will come out of the grass and grab it. Another excellent kind of style bait would be like this flat-sided crankbait. This little guy right here. This is the I'm a Shaker. And what's nice about this bait is the wind will pick up a lot in February. And when it does, it's so cold and miserable. Well, that's when those fish really get to hitting something tight. But this bait's got a transfer system in it. It's got like a tungsten BB in it. I think it's tungsten anyway, but it's heavy, and it'll shoot to the back. So when you go to cast it, it'll shoot like a mile. And it'll make it easy to cast against that wind. And then the other bait that I like in early February is something very tiny. And this little guy right here is called a Foxy Fry. A lot of baits this style come February are absolutely dangerous. I fish them on a spinning rod, and I actually prefer to use it on like a real light braid. This is actually a 1 pound diameter braided line. And it's just, you get so much vibration out of it on a spinning rod. You can cast it like a mile, and it's just an excellent little suspending bait. And, but that little tight vibration, zzz, and I just kind of sweep the rod with it, and this guy will just, and that triggers a lot of fish. And it's funny, but you actually land more fish on that little bait than you do with, you know, a bait with just a single hook. And I don't know why. It's just, I don't think I've ever really lost any fish on that little bait. Better knock on wood now.
All right, here's a question from Big Fish Hunter, and it may be a little bit early to talk about some of this stuff, but any new sponsors that you can talk about for 2014?
I have got a whole bunch of new sponsors for this year. Unfortunately, we got some press releases coming up, and I can't break the ice on them yet, but I'm very excited about a few of them. I will kind of reach out on one of them. I signed with CMMG, Central Missouri Machine Gun Company, and they make some ARs and stuff. So it's a fun tactical, you know, sponsorship there. But you know, I've got some other sponsors that will be in press releases, and you'll see on basseast.com before long.
Perfect. Well, let's go ahead and start trying to wrap this thing up, Fred. One question that we got a while ago was Classic predictions. You know, how do you think Guntersville is going to fish? Is it going to be as good as everybody says it's going to be?
Oh man, you know, I was there in October. It was horrible, but it always is. Every time I go there, somehow end up there in October. And the reason, you know, it's probably not that bad, but the grass was grown so thick, the vegetation, that everybody for weeks on end were going down the exact same weed lines and getting that first, you know, the 8-foot line of grass and punching mats and throwing frogs. And, you know, a lot of those fish never really got to get messed with because they were so far in that grass that you couldn't get your boat in there if you wanted to. I mean, you could run in there on pad, but then, you know, you stirred up the environment and they shut down. So it gets frustrating. People don't have the patience to wait. I know I don't. So, you know, there was a good amount of grass, which gave those fish a lot of time to basically be left alone. You know, before the Alabama rig came out, they would also be offshore suspending and get left alone that way too. So the big thing is those fish, you know, they're like us. We need a vacation. And if they have the opportunity to relax and get away from the fishermen, which they have, it's going to come back strong. And I got a feeling you're going to see records at this Classic. I got a feeling that there are going to be, you know, I'm going to catch 10-pounder, so, you know, I'm sure someone else will too. That'll be big fish caught.
All right, here's a couple, or one really practical question for today. When fishing in the cold, what's the hardest part of your body to keep warm?
Your hands. Your ears, but you can put earmuffs on. There's nothing worse than when my ears freeze. So um, I've been wearing earmuffs. It sounds silly, but they work great. And then hands. And Pepper Custom Baits has got this jacket. I know you've introduced it on your website. I know you just got one, but they've got this jacket, and I should have brought it up, but it's got built-in mitts, so you can actually pull your hand in, and I keep a hand warmer in the mitt. So now it's basically like a mitt like this, and then you can pull your hand back out. So when you're driving the boat and stuff in the cold, you don't need to necessarily put on extra gloves. You just slide your hands in there, put your hand warmers in there, and if you can't fit, if your hands are too cold to fish, you're not fishing. Trouble. So I'd say this jacket is probably one of the coolest jackets. It reminds me a lot of the snowboard jackets I used to wear back in the day. So.
All right, here's another one. I'm curious to see how you answer this one. How often do you finesse fish during a tournament?
Sometimes my wife reminds me I don't do it enough. I've won more money finesse fishing, I think, in the big picture, and it's funny because I just don't do it enough. I love power fishing, but everyone's getting so good, and obviously the lake's trying to get more pressure than they used to. So finesse fishing is something I'm probably gonna have to get back into the swing of things, But we also, Bass does an excellent job going to these lakes at the best time. It seems like we fall right into the best week of the year, and then power fishing excels. So, I don't know. I need to finesse fish a little bit more. I love doing it, and I'm good at it. I've got 2 rods with eye rods just for what I call power finesse fishing. A little bit heavier action, but I do my drop shot, my shaky head, my wacky rig, my Nico rig, all that stuff on those rods, and they're excellent choices.
Perfect. One thing I think it was Swindle told me last year was to put one of those heat patches across your kidneys when it's really cold too. Is that something that you do? It seems to help a lot.
It's funny. Those heat patches. I remember going to Clarksville the first time, and it was so dang cold. It was Bassmaster Tour before we were the elites, and that was my very first year, doing that with them, and fishing professionally with Bassmasters. And I put a heat pad right here on my head, and then put my hat on because I was so cold. And at about 10:30, I had like a migraine headache, and I remember laying down on my boat, passed out, going, what is wrong with me? I don't know if I was stressed off not, fishing or what. Then I finally just knocked my hat off and the heat pad fell down. So I could tell you don't ever put one right there because you will get a headache. But I've not done it on the back. But that's a great idea. I'll have to try it.
Well, Fred, let's go ahead and wrap this thing up. I know you got things you got to take care of. Man, we certainly appreciate you joining us tonight. And hey, man, we'll see you in a couple of weeks at Guntersville. Yeah,
I'll be down at Okeechobee before that. I'm doing the FLW tour as well. So
that's right, the Iron Man.
Yeah, we're gonna go for it all this year.
Boom boom.
Right.
Hey, thank you guys.
All right,
hey,
Fred.
boom boom.
Yeah.
One last question.
Okay.
Is video beat typing?
What's that?
Is answer the questions on video beat typing?
Oh, this is the deal right here. I mean, granted, I'll probably go back and go, I should have said this or I should have said that. But when you type, you might have a little more time to think it out. But you know what you're getting right off the hit. There's no,
Good work,
I got no idea. You're getting me. You're getting the real me right here. So this is
that's right. We got some bugs we got to work out.
I would love to work out. Let's do this more often. I want to do some seminars. Maybe and what's cool about it? It's absolutely free.
Absolutely, Fred. Thanks a lot, man. And enjoy yourself, man. We'll see you soon.
Cool. Thank you.
Boom, boom, it's getting